may begin.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Ethics Fundamentals series. I'm Cheryl Kane Piasecki, and I am very pleased to be joined today by Mary Capule from the Office of Personnel Management. Mary is a certified public accountant. That's correct?
Yes.
And she started with the OPM in 1997 with the IG's office as an auditor. And then in 2003, she moved over to the Office of the Combined Federal Campaign, where she is a CFC compliance specialist.
Yes.
We're very pleased today that Mary has agreed to come and talk to us all about the recent changes to the CFC regulations, with some particular focus on ethics aspects of those changes. So Patrick, if you can pull up the slide deck, I want to give you some instructions. Mary is going to provide us with a presentation. And then she's going to be dedicating the remainder of the time to answering any questions that you have. So what we're encouraging folks, whether you're on the phone or whether you're on the Hangout, either one, we're encouraging you to send any questions that you have to trainingregistration@oge.gov, and we've posted that email address up on the screen for those of you who are watching us today, or for those of you on the phone, if you want to just reply to the email that you received earlier today with the instructions for today's broadcast, your questions will be received, and we can then pose them to Mary when she's finished with her presentation. For those of you on the phone, if you want to ask questions over the phone, we will be doing that once Mary has completed her part of the presentation. But I do encourage you, if you want to send emails throughout the presentation as they're occurring to you, we'll obviously take them in the order that we get them once Mary is ready to accept questions. So Mary, without further ado, I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. The objective today is to, as we said, understand the changes to the CFC from a ethics perspective. I do want to give you a kind of high-level background as to how these changes came about. 2011 was the 50th anniversary of the issuance of the executive order creating the CFC, and so it was felt a good time to kind of look and see, what's working, what's not working, and what we might need to do, because we were actually pretty much still using the process from 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we developed the Federal Advisory Commission. It was made up of charitable organizations, federal employees, industry watchdog groups. We had OIG representation, GAO representation, and we actually had an ethics officer from USPS to try to make sure that we were looking at all aspects of the CFC. And from their report and recommendations, we revised the regulations to what they are now. So it was a long process. The regulations were issued in 2014. But it was a major change in the whole process, and the changes were supposed to be implemented in 2016. We got a 1-year reprieve on that, and they are being implemented here in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk about some of the changes, but we'll also talk about some things that stay the same, because we've noticed some things that come up that are happening out there where there are violations of the regulations going on that we just kind of bring up and make sure that people understand. So high level, we're changing to a centralized charity and pledging system. So one of the things that we've had is a lot of times the national office will send out correspondence about the CFC to all their field offices and say, if you want to pledge, go to CFC NCA. And we had 163 campaigns, all with their own websites.
Oh, wow.
And they were very upset when these things would go out to the field, and they told to go to the National Capital Area website. So that's all being changed. We will have a centralized charity system that all campaigns will go to get their list of charities for the pledging, for all that stuff. And that way, the national offices can be sending out this stuff and doing more encouraging that way. We're also changing from 163 local campaigns to 35 zones.
Wow.
So it's we're just combining things together and hoping that will alleviate some of the amount of federal employee times, because one of the questions we get a lot of is from Congress, how much federal employee time is spent on the CFC?
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to make it more efficient. Um, we're bringing about more transparency for employees. When they get into the website and make their pledge, they'll be able to see when the money from their paycheck goes into the account. They'll be able to see when the money is paid to the charities, because that's always kind of been a black hole that has concerned employees. So that's one of the things. We're not allowing cash anymore. There's been a lot of problems with cash and the fact that it's very easy to walk away with it.
I was going to say, it can go astray.
Yes, and our IGs are very busy, and to have to call in these various IGs because the $1,000 from this fundraising thing did not make it through to the campaign. It just they have other things to do, and
Right.
so taking away cash just alleviates that problem. And we're not allowing fundraising events. That was something that was taking a lot of employee time. It actually was a very small part of the whole campaign. It also took the focus away. What we're trying to do is focus on the charities.
Mhm.
It put more of the focus on the event and not on the charities. And so people would say, okay, I bought this 25-cent cupcake. I've made my donation
Contribution.
to the charity. And it kind of was taking away from really getting them to understand the charities, what the charities are out there doing, and getting them to understand the need to assist these charities. So we're taking away fundraising events and wanting people to focus more on educational type events. Not that you can't have fun, but it's just no fundraising.
And I think this is probably an area where you're going to get a lot of questions. I'm assuming you typically do in this area.
Oh, yes. So you'll see what I've done on these slides is actually just I've put the actual regulatory citation. I'm not going to read it to you, but it's just to kind of talk about the various areas. So this citation, of course, to make them big enough to read, sometimes it took a couple slides. So this particular citation of 5 CFR 950.102D, it's talking about how you can make your contributions, and it's going electronic. And we've got, you can do your pledge, you can do your credit and debit cards, you can do e-checks. Like I said, no cash. One thing that's going to change here, because we say, where we had contractor personnel, credit union employees, and other persons, as well as retired federal employees, may make a single contribution. This was issued, like I said, in 2014. There was in October an EO, and I've got the EO number there, the executive order number, issued, which now allows retirees to pledge from their annuities.
Oh,
So they will be able to go in and make pledges from their annuities. So when we change this regulation, and you'll see that part where it says for the first 5 campaign periods, we're going to still allow non-electronic, which means some paper. We're trying to get away from paper, but people were worried about going totally away. So when 5 years are up, we're going to be doing a look back anyway, and at that point revising the regulations to incorporate this EO, since retirees may now pledge through their annuity. Another thing this EO did, and this is another one I know I'm going to get questions about, is it allows employees to now pledge volunteer time. It was felt that this can get employees at least interested. If they don't have the money, it at least gets them interested in, the charitable part. And when they do have the money in a few years, when their kids are out of college and things like that, then they'll be, but it was a way to get them interested in the charitable world, and at least volunteer time. We're still developing guidance. There is some guidance based on an executive order issued by President George W. Bush on encouraging volunteerism, and there is some guidance out there for agencies and how to develop volunteer programs within each agency. We're kind of piggybacking on that. We're not requiring agencies to implement this. We're encouraging them to look at this. But the idea being that if your agency doesn't have a program already set up, they can still pledge volunteer time, but it's their own personal time, and not government time, and
Oh,
we'll put out
okay,
a
I
lot of
see.
guidance on that. So it won't be that a way. We're not trying to find a way for employees to say, "Let me take 5 hours a week off from work and go over here instead." It's
Right, right, right.
it's it would be their own personal time that they would be pledging, unless your agency has a
A program. And would they then pledge to a particular charitable organization?
If it's yes, they pledge to the charitable organization. If your agency has a program, I know one of the rules that's out there for the agencies when they have programs is that those have to actually be related to the agency mission. So those
Gotcha.
agencies that have one, but if you don't have a program, or if you don't wish to pledge through that program, you can pledge to any agency. When you go in the system, agencies will have said whether they have volunteer opportunities available. And you'll see that in the pledging system, this agency has volunteer opportunities available, and you can pledge some time to that agency.
Excellent.
And again, the good old no cash. We just keep saying that, no cash.
No, but it bears repeating,
Yes.
because folks who are used to that aspect of it need to remember that no.
Yeah. So, and of course, here we're talking, and we stressed that that these are non-solicitation. They can have events, but we got to remember that this is for these events held during duty hours, and it's to talk about the voluntary giving, but these events have to be non-solicitation events. That doesn't mean that you can't wait, because we want to have charities there. We want to have as many charities at these events so that people can learn about them. It doesn't mean that you can't have a centralized computer there to allow employees to go and do an online pledge. That's different from a solicitation event where you're collecting cash.
Okay.
Checks.
So as long as they would have a computer there where if somebody wanted to go in and use the computer to fill out their pledge card and commit, whatever the pledge they wanted to make to whatever charity, that's fine. But you wouldn't allow a cash box to sit there where people could put cash in it.
Correct.
In lieu of that. Okay.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. And we've had some questions. Oh, well, we love our chili cook-offs. Well, that's fine. You can do an event around the chili cook-off to bring it in. It just won't be that I know in others it was put the money in, and whichever's chili got the most money was the one that won. This is just going to be voting, and the person will have bragging rights, get the ribbon or whatever. But it could be a draw to an event where you still have, and like we said, we always encourage having those charities there to be able to talk about what they do, and we have a lot of research has shown that it really makes a difference when you can have that face-to-face talk with the charity. And I know one time, I developed the system we were using before where I had to verify every charity participating in the CFC. So I had physically looked at every charity's name and verified they were IRS and everything. But I went down to a charity fair that we were having, and I spotted this one that looked, I'd looked at its name and everything, but until I really talked to that person,
right.
I was like, wow.
It's the personal touch.
Yeah, it really made a difference. So that's why we're trying to get it back to be, it's not the bake sales, it's not the book sales, it's not the other thing, it's the charities.
So my question for you, and I'm sure there's some folks out there will want to know too, how does it work with getting a charity to your event? Who gets to decide which charities can show up at an event?
Now, in each zone, there's going to be what's called an outreach coordinator, which is an organization that's going to help them with the marketing aspect. And they should have, in each zone, should have already contacted all the charities and said, do you have people available in our area for events? And then it's supposed to be a basic event that you say, hey, I have room for 10 charities, and they will whatever method they have next on the list, or drawing from a hat, however they do, but just as long as it's a equitable method of determining it, and you're not getting the same charities every time. But that's how it normally is done. We find out who has people available in the area, and then it's equitable to make sure that every charity gets their chance to be at an event.
So key workers within an agency shouldn't be themselves inviting charities in.
No.
They should be working through this other.
The local federal coordinating committee would have the outreach coordinator working with them, and they would be the ones that would get the charities to the organization. Now, some organizations might have different issues because it might be that they can only have people that already have clearances to be able to get onto the ground. So there might be some issues like that, but that's, that would be, agency specific. But pretty much most, if you're going to just get into the lobby area, they can get enough of a clearance to be able to come in and do the charity fair for the day. And then it's just making sure it's equitable and all charities have the opportunity. So, and there is the part, there's no food can be paid for. And I used to, of course, when this was issued, we would say, well, there is this, what was it called? There were some agency funds that they used to have available, and my mind has gone blank as to those discretionary funds. But GAO then put out after they saw this, and I guess an agency asked GAO, may we use some appropriated funds to pay for food, and GAO came out with an announcement saying that food is a personal expense, and so you can't use agency funds for pay for food either. So you can't use any CFC funds, you can't use agency funds to pay for food. People need to know this in advance, because even if you do the chili cook-off, and I've gotten these calls before where people have done bake sales, and then they've called me because they've tried to get reimbursement for the cost of them baking the cookies.
Oh, wow.
and the campaign has said no, and they've contacted me, and so I was like, no, you really can't. So people need to know that, if they're doing something where everybody's bringing in the food or something, that no, they're not going to be able to get reimbursed from anybody. So that was both GAO. The other issue we say prizes is offered, and this is where we insist that they go to the agency ethics officer. They've got to be modest in nature. We had one campaign that determined that a car was modest in nature, because if you took the number of people participating in the campaign and divided that by the cost of the car, for each person in the campaign, it was like, no, that doesn't quite work. And so we've actually issued some guidance in 2011, which I have the link later in here with, we call it ethics in the CFC. And we actually just say you need to use OGE standards, which in terms of what we consider modest and reasonable, these are considered prizes and gifts, and you have to be appropriate in what they are. So we've been very, very clear about that, as it was getting a little overboard.
Now, I'm wondering, do you all have a position on, I know we've gotten questions about the appropriateness of soliciting outside sources for prizes for your kickoff campaigns, or for free food for your kickoff campaigns?
The food is, with the food, we determined that even since it's, and of course the process is changing a bit, but we had said no for the food because it was considered a donated to cover an expense, and since food is not allowed to be a CFC expense, we said no. We've left that up to the agencies, and that's actually we're not too thrilled with this idea. We're hoping it kind of goes away with the new change, because there's a lot of issues with prohibited sources.
Yes, exactly.
And so we've noted that we have to be careful about the prohibited source and different agency rules. So we're hoping with the change in the way things are done, that we're going to be more focused on the charities and less on these other types of activities, that will kind of just go away in and of itself. But we do leave that to the agencies themselves to determine. But food can't be done because that's considered a CFC. It would be considered a CFC expense, and so they can't do that. And we're very sensitive about prohibited sources. Most people are going to donate because they want to get in and get some sort of government thing. Now, the other thing is that since we're not allowing any fundraising, we always had a lot of problems with people having book sales where they were providing a portion of the
The
profits
proceeds.
to it, and we that was not allowed, because it was either you donate the books and we sell the books and all the money goes to CFC, or not. But it was a way of these vendors to get into the building and make money for themselves. And we're like, no, the CFC is not meant for
To be
private
a-
enterprises to make make money. And so but with not having fundraising events, that eliminates that.
Well, one thing we like to remind agencies too, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is that when the key workers who work in the agencies, that's actually sort of an official duty activity. When they're engaged in the key worker activity for the CFC, that's considered to be part of their official duties.
Yes, in fact, I've got a slide in a little bit about that, yes.
Okay, I don't want to preempt you here,
okay.
and I think, again, I think these things are good for people to hear more than one time too. So our perspective has been that when a key worker is soliciting anything from an outside source, they're doing that as an official duty activity. So if your agency, effectively, they're soliciting a gift that on behalf of the agency. So unless your agency has gift acceptance authority, our position has been that we think that really that's kind of the first lens through which you have to see this, because when they're doing it, it's an official duty activity. So we usually like to remind folks of that this isn't just a personal thing that someone's going out and doing. When they're acting in that capacity, they're acting in an official duty capacity.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And that was a lot of the issue. And I know they were getting letters. The one nice thing is now there will no longer be what they had was the outreach coordinators are not actually 501c3s. The centralized website that we have is developed by a 501c3, because that has to be for funds to go through. It's got to be 501c3. But they won't be giving those letters that we found that the local campaign principal combined fund organizations were giving to these key workers and saying, hey, go solicit in our name. And so that won't be an issue anymore, because the outreach coordinators don't have anything to say, hey, you get a tax deductible gift here anymore, and doing it that way. So that will cut that down too.
Gotcha.
But we were really leaving it to each agency, because there were some that might still want to do that and have the authority.
Right.
But like I said, we're trying to move the focus away from those types of things and back to the charities.
Right.
So, okay. So, what stays the same? One of the things I wanted to talk about, preventing coercive activities. And I know this is almost impossible to stop, but I do want to remind everybody that the CFC is a voluntary program. We do unfortunately have a lot, and of the more I won't necessarily military type, but those types and everything, where the commanding officer will pull everybody together, say, here's your card, fill it out right now and turn it back in, and things like that. It's not allowed. One of the things that we have in the regs, supervisors can't be soliciting. But that, the head of the agency can still be supportive of the CFC and put out general notices, but they can't be soliciting. And the one we have a real problem here, supervisory inquiries about whether an employee chose to participate. And much as we keep trying, in fact, I thought this was interesting when we were talking with the payroll offices and setting this up. It turns out that even though we had all this in and key workers weren't supposed to, a lot of them were contacting the payroll offices and having the payroll offices send them information about who pledged. And so the payroll, because with the way we're doing this, so well, how are we supposed to get this information when they ask for it? I'm like, they weren't supposed to ask for it. You weren't supposed to give it to them. So yeah. So I'm not going to worry about the fact that you won't be able to give it to them anymore, because you weren't supposed to. So they could get a very high level summary. You can't set 100% goals. You can't set personal dollar amounts. And you can't set list of non-contributors or list of contributors, because that tells you you're non-contributors. So those are some of the, and the other key one that we've had a problem with is using as a factor in it is the results of the solicitation. You can't use that as a factor in a performance appraisal
Oh my
because the
gosh.
CFC is a voluntary program. We've had this issue come up before where it's been put in as a factor, and we've had to advise the agencies that no, you cannot do that. It is working on the CFC is an official federal duty, which we're going to get to in a minute, but it's you can't use the results of the solicitation now if they were working and the loan executive that they were under, or somebody says, well, they actually didn't do anything, or there were issues in terms of just their general performance, then that's a different story, but you can't use the results of the solicitation. So I want to get here with establishing the local federal coordinating committees to kind of walk you through here to show that those are also federal duties. The OPM director develops the campaigns. They get the zones. They pull these local federal coordinating committees together. They usually start with a federal executive board and get people to come in from various agencies to serve on the local federal coordinating committees. So I wanted to make sure people understood that this was a federal duty. We have found that a lot of agencies are requiring their employees to take leave to attend meetings.
Oh, wow.
Of the local federal coordinating committees, and that's we're getting calls a lot, and I've had to send letter after letter, things from, but some agencies are just not understanding that this is a federal duty, and so when they're attending these meetings, when they're coming to the annual meeting that we have to train these members, they're being told they have to take leave and that they have to pay their own way.
Oh my gosh.
And so we just wanted to kind of reiterate that this is a federal duty, and so it's covered under any federal regulations, and that they would be considered on the job, and so no leave if they have to travel. I understand some agencies might not be able to send them on the travel, but that's one thing, but you're not going to tell them that they pay their own way. So this is just more of the. And I just wanted to give you some resources here. That was the first one. There is the link to the actual first Federal Register posting, which shows, as you probably all know, if you've seen Federal Register postings, it's all the information about why we decided to do all these things that we decided to do. And if you really don't want to read through all that, then the second link is just to the regulations. And I only picked the regulations that affected ethics. So there was a lot of other changes but the ones we talked about today were just the ones that would affect ethics. There's the link to the memo we issued about ethics in the CFC, and the GAO decision about refreshments, and the new EO that I referenced that came out after the regulations. So it does conflict a little with the current regulations, but we'll be revising those in about we say in about 5 years. That's when we have to look at them. Then we have to go through the revision. So it'll be 8 or 9 years.
The normal regulatory process.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, we're up to the question part.
Okay, so for those of you on the phone who want to call in with questions, please feel free to call in with questions. And for those of you on the Hangout, we would ask you to send your questions to trainingregistration@oge.gov. And Mary has agreed to answer as many questions as we can in the time remaining.
Thank you. And as a quick reminder, it's just *1 to ask a question from the phone lines. Again, *1. Thank you.
And we do have a question coming in on the email box. Beverly asks, could you please clarify what is meant by pledging volunteer time for a CFC? Is it volunteering work time or personal time?
That will depend on whether your agency has a volunteer program. From CFC perspective, it is personal time. And we're working on guidance right now. I've given a couple of these talks and did get some feedback from some ethics officers. So part of our draft guidance, we do talk about, hey, you're not covered by workman's comp, and various things like that. You shouldn't be wearing any government type of uniform thing to show that, because you're there on your personal time. But we will be allowing, like I said, the draft guidance is working through, but the plan is to allow agencies that have a volunteerism program to, work it through the CFC too, and allow donors that want to pledge their volunteer time through the agency program to use the CFC process. But it is first it's mainly a personal time, unless your agency has a program.
Okay, and if an agency does have a program, so then would it be a matter of like you'd be granted administrative leave or excused absence?
It is administrative leave during. That's what the guidance out there right now is it's administrative leave for it. But they're very strict. It's a separate guidance based on President Bush's executive order from about 12 or 13 years ago, and separate guidance that was issued in 2012 by OPM. It's not related to the CFC, but we're looking at making sure it kind of operates together with it, so we can so agencies can take advantage of using the CFC program to get
to encourage people to engage in volunteerism.
Yeah,
that's excellent. That's excellent.
And we do have a few more questions. This next question concerns special events associated with the CFC. And this person understands that these events aren't designed to sell items for purposes of raising funds for the CFC, wondering if the informational events may sell food items or other items to attract employees at the events and collect cash only for purposes of recovering costs and reimbursement for the food paid for by the employees. So would it be okay to, say, have a hot dog stand that exists solely for the purposes of selling hot dogs to create interest for the event?
I haven't had that question before, and I have an inclination of how I want to answer it, but I think I would rather take it back and look at it a little further before I give the answer to that. So if that's okay, we'll take it back and discuss
we'll table
it.
that one, and we'll make sure that you get that one to answer back at the office. Yes.
Excellent. And this person had a follow-on question, which is that at these sort of informational or interest-generating events, is it okay to have a computer there where people may make donations, and is that permissible even though we're not supposed to be raising funds at the event? So
yes, because when we say fundraising events, that's where we're talking about collecting cash and things like that. But yes, we actually encourage, if you've got the technology available, to have a computer there to allow people to make their pledges in the online system. We actually encourage you to have something there for them to do that.
I see. So making a voluntary contribution through a CFC system is not the same thing as fundraising, because the event isn't designed to actually literally collect the funds.
That's correct.
Okay. Let's see if we have any questions on the phone. We do have a number of other email questions.
Do we have any questions on the phone?
No, ma'am. There are no questions on the phone lines at this time.
Okay, so why don't we proceed with the ones we're receiving through email?
The next question is, when we talk about prizes or awards that are modest in nature and value, is there a place we can look for a definition of modest or in nature or value? And does CFC or OGE kind of have that definition available?
We usually actually toss it to OGE. We say, look at the OGE regulations. I think we usually say, like the $25 because gifts rules and things like that. So we usually say that's what we're looking at. There's also IRS regulations in terms of when you start giving out prizes with things that you have to look at what's taxable as a prize, and I think the IRS had even lower dollar amounts in terms of once you start. If you ever notice, like when you donate, when you see those PBS telethon things,
right? And
it's like, if you donate, you get the book, and then when you get your tax return, it says, well, okay, here's what you donated, here's the value of the book, deduct this from that amount before you take it off on your taxes, because there are all those issues with once you receive something
in exchange.
Yes. In fact, we've had to really worry because we found out some years ago, we've had to talk to charities we have right on the pledge card, which, it's no goods or services received in exchange for this pledge. And that's because that's required in order for it to be tax deductible. But then we found out charities were telling donors, well, if you send us a copy of your pledge card, we'll send you this gift.
Oh, wow.
And we had to put a stop to that because I said that negates the tax deductibility.
Right.
And then we actually have a kind of special place in the IRS regulations where it even says, hey, your CFC pledge card is good for proof. We don't need all this other proof. And we're like, we kind of want to keep that in the IRS regulations, that the federal donors could just show their CFC pledge card and their last earning and leave statement to show how much was actually deducted and get their tax deduction.
Right.
And if people
and not
start
commit tax fraud.
Yes.
That's really what we're getting at.
Yes, basically, yes. So we always have to be careful on that, since the prizes are not in exchange for any sort of donation. We kind of would stick with the OGE regulations in terms of what appropriate amounts for gifts and things like that are. So that's what we refer people to as the OGE regulations on how much you can do for a gift and things like that. So.
Yeah, and I know that OGE itself does not have, I mean, with respect to this, to anything that would apply to the CFC, I mean, we can use our dollar values for the exceptions as benchmarks. And I think that can be a handy sort of benchmark to use, but that's certainly not dispositive. And it certainly doesn't mean that OGE is insisting that our dollar values are the values you must use in conjunction with the CFC.
And we have
just remember that a car is not modest in value.
Under anybody's, estimation of modest. Yes.
And we have a kind of a very specific question. This viewer writes, are we still permitted to have people pay $5 to wear jeans on Fridays, or is that considered a fundraising event?
That's considered a fundraising event. You can still have your casual Fridays all you want, but it wouldn't be a CFC fundraiser. You can't collect the money for the CFC now. And one of the changes is when those monies were taken in, it was kind of put into a pot, the undesignated fund. There will no longer be an availability of undesignated funds. Everybody, when you go online, you will need to designate to a specific organization. So that pot of money is not going to be able to be used anywhere. That was a change that went through, that when you go on, you will be pledging to a specific organization or organizations.
Administratively, that just has to be so much better, I would think.
Yeah, because the money had to always be split proportionately among all the charities that participated, and now that it's centralized, and to try and have them split this, what really comes out to maybe 1% of the total campaign among the 20,000 charities that participate.
Right.
The cost of doing that, those calculations, and the penny that each organization would get,
was certainly not worth giving people that option.
And this is another question about volunteering time to a charity. And this viewer asks, does an agency require a program in writing describing how an employee can pledge volunteer time to a charity? And under such a program, are employees required to pledge to a charity that supports the agency mission? Okay.
Under the CFC, employees can volunteer their own personal time, and the agency doesn't have to have anything. There are OPM, but it's not within the CFC office. There are OPM guidelines that were issued in 2012 specifically about how to develop an agency program. I do know they do require it to be mission-oriented, but there are other requirements for that. And I would recommend, we're actually going to be issuing a memo soon about it, but I would recommend that anybody who's interested in that, that's a 2012 memo that was issued by OPM. You might want to go to the OPM website and just do, volunteerism and see what that memo says. But there are very specific. One was that it had to be, that the charity had to be agency mission related.
And another viewer asks if recognized employee associations are able to conduct fundraising events.
Okay, that is still in the regulations where they can do it for the benefit of their own members. It's not that they can just hold a fundraising event for any charity. employee organizations can do fundraising events for the benefit of their own members. That's outside, excuse me, the CFC purview. That's one of the exceptions. That, along with the gifts in kind, which is how you're able to have the Feds Feed Family right now. You'll be able to have, the Christmas time when you're doing the Toys for Tots. So gifts in kind are the other thing that are outside the CFC purview. And probably remind everybody here, one of the way Feds Feed Family right now is going on is it is very specific that it's got to be the food. It can't, or the supplies. It cannot be cash donations through Feds Feed Family. That's a question that comes a lot. If it's a cash donation, then it becomes a fundraiser, and that's the CFC is the only place that can be for monetary gifts to a charitable organization. So so that's, since Feds Feed Family is going on right now, I thought I'd bring that up.
Yes, perfect timing.
Excellent. And I think this is another question. I think I've seen this a few times here, but just to confirm, pledges may be accepted at CFC events. When we're talking about a fundraising event, we mean where some activity is happening in exchange for contributions, but merely having the opportunity to fill out a pledge card does not turn an event into a fundraiser.
Correct.
And the other question we have here is whether checks are allowed. Is the ban on cash just currency, or are checks permissible during this period where paper forms are available?
When paper forms are available, they can fill out a paper form with a check, and that's fine. So yeah, and there are going to be various ways that those will be sent to the centralized. We're still finalizing all that, but there will be various methods for those to be sent to the centralized campaign administrator. One of which is the employee can mail it themselves. They'll have the address, and the employee can mail it themselves. But we're looking at other options in terms of agencies having a centralized place to collect it. What we're concerned about, we've had a lot of concern, is of course the pledge forms have they're doing a check, that's one thing, but if they're filling it out and doing a payroll deduction, it's got PII on it.
Gotcha.
And I've gotten calls from key workers before who were uncomfortable collecting that. So we're trying to limit how many hands that touch that PII.
Gotcha.
And so we're putting out guidance in terms of how it can be done to make sure that, we don't have 10 people. And we've had, unfortunately, a lot of issues in the past with people they have the envelopes with their pledges in, they're taking it to the local campaign, and they stop at the grocery store on the way and leave the envelope in their car. And when they come back to the car, the envelope's missing.
Oh dear.
And so it's had all these pledge forms with PII on it. So that's why we're saying we're really trying to restrict. And that's one of the reasons we're trying to go with this electronic system, because that leaves the least number of people seeing that PII. But we're really trying to keep it to a minimum how many people touch that PII.
Excellent. And we seem to have a lot of questions about chili cook-offs.
It's lunchtime. It's lunchtime.
That's right. That's making me hungry, actually.
So with the new prohibition on fundraising events, voting with money for purposes of contributing that to one or more charities is prohibited. Is that accurate?
That's correct. That's correct. Voting with money, they can still have it as a draw to get people there. They can just vote with a vote. But the idea being that the chili cook-off is there, but you're surrounded by all these charities with all their wonderful information. And as you're testing the chili, you can be talking to charities. And
right.
And
people seem to be having some difficulty with events being allowed, but fundraising events not being allowed. And if I understand correctly, if you have an event and there's a computer where someone can elect any charity they want to make their contribution, fill out their pledge card, that's an interest event. If someone's asking specifically for a contribution for a purpose, either to be determined by someone else or for a specific charity, that would be a fundraising event and would be prohibited. Is that correct? And then further, is there going to be any further guidance issued about organizing these events and sort of do's or don'ts?
What will help with the guidance is that the outreach coordinators will be there at the local levels to help them work with and make sure that their events are within. We just issued a contract a couple months ago to 4 organizations that will be getting task orders to be outreach coordinators and do all that type of work. So they've been trained on the regs. They'll be able to train everybody there in terms of the appropriateness of what can and cannot be done, and how to go about these events. And so they're going to be the key. So the local federal coordinating committee should be putting people in touch and working with the outreach coordinators to get that. That's what they're the local marketers is what we're
Gotcha.
calling them, is to help them show how to develop these events without collecting funds. And that's that's the key, is that they're interest events, and so somebody has an interest, says I want to pledge or I want that's fine, but there shouldn't be anything to collect money or anything like that, or like I said, the chili cook-off, the other things. The chili cook-off is fine as long as, number one, the participants know that they're paying for their own creation of the chili.
And they will not be reimbursed.
They will not be reimbursed. and it's basically, so it's be like, modest prize for whoever wins first place. So
right.
Even if it's the blue ribbon and bragging rights, and which I think when you come to a chili cook-off, I think that seems to be something that people that do chili seem to really like, is those bragging rights over anything else.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think in any of those kind of competitions, it's just the fact you won,
Right. So we have a question on a slightly different vein about agency goal setting. And this viewer asks, just to be clear, while setting 100% participation goals is not permitted, and establishing personal dollar goals and quotas are not permitted, setting of organizational goals is permitted. Is that accurate? Yes.
You have to be careful when you say organizational goals, that you're putting it at a level where, you could say, okay, in our case, OPM has a goal of X amount, and, each division within OPM that has, at least a certain number of people. You don't want it down to where you're saying organization, where it's an organization of 3 people and you've set a goal for them.
Right.
Because that's getting too close to personal goals.
Right.
And so you've got to get to that. And unfortunately, the other thing is, as we all know, in terms of coercion is in the eye of the beholder.
Yes, it's true.
And so you always have to keep that in mind, and you might set a goal and somebody feels it's coercive, and so then you just have to talk with the agency about adjusting it so it's not giving that feeling of coercion.
Okay. And the follow-on question here is, what if a charity requests participation level data? So if a charity or someone outside wants to know how many folks at an agency participated in the CFC,
that's the agency should be providing that. That's the local campaign would have that information, and we've got different reports levels that we can provide that will be sterile enough that they can't get employee information and things like that, but it'll give them a general idea of what's going on. So that always should be sent to the local federal coordinating committee for questions like that.
So would it be fair to say the only competition component is now based on donations from within an agency or a large office, such that it's not coercive?
Yeah, you can. I mean, I understand, especially in the military, they love to have the especially, and now with our larger zones, we might even have two Air Force bases within a zone, and they want to compete against each other. And that friendly competition is fine, as long as we don't have the commanding officers then lining their people up to require them. And like I said, it goes back to the old coercion is in the eye of the beholder. So those kind of friendly competitions are fine, as long as they don't cross that line. It's just that line that we always have to be very careful of.
And along those lines, may an agency accept unsolicited events as gifts to use as prizes at educational events? So I imagine they're thinking about things like tickets to an event, or something that might be provided by an outside organization as a prize to use at an educational event.
Okay, I know that was one of the things we talked about a little earlier in terms of the whether it's
A gift to the
prohibited
agency.
source, the
Mhm.
gift to the agency, and there you have to always look at those aspects of it too. And to me, and I've seen these, a ticket to an event is usually not going to be modest in nature.
Mhm.
Of course, I'm here in the DC. Well, I live outside the DC area, but even in my rural area that I live in, tickets to events could usually run $75 to $100.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
And so
Exactly.
you've got to always take that into consideration. That's going to really push that modest in nature. Now maybe it's a local ball game that's only $5. So, and yes, but if the local ball team is a not-for-profit organization, they
Mhm.
can't donate to anything to the CFC for. Oh my God, the participating charities cannot be donating items to the CFC for any sort of prizes.
Mhm.
So it's those are probably gonna have to be taken on a case-by-case basis.
Mhm.
And I think my phone number was, or did we? Because my phone number was on the original slides. I'm not sure if it's later on in the slides, but I know my phone number was on the original slides that we've.
And we will
sent.
share the deck with everyone who registered. We'll post it to the Max page as soon as we're done here, so you can find that there.
So, and yeah, feel free to call with individual questions like that. But the basic guidance comes in that I would think most of these events it's going to be more than modest in nature, and that will X that out. So.
I think, and the other thing I just want people to be mindful of is anytime we're talking about outside sources supplying an official event with anything, I think it calls into question whether or not we're dealing with an appropriations issue and whether or not the agency or someone has the authority to accept whatever the donation is. Because it's not necessarily individuals in their personal capacity accepting these things. It's people accepting it on behalf of the agency as part of their official duties. And so again, I mean, we are dealing potentially with appropriations law here as well, because CFC is not a gift acceptance authority, is it? It doesn't provide any authority for an agency to accept donations. So I think everybody has to be mindful of that aspect of these types of events as well.
Excellent. We have another question about competition. And the question is, if an agency posts a chart which shows how one office is faring against another office with respect to how much each office has pledged, is that considered coercive? And further, does OPM set particular goals as to how much it expects each agency to collect?
OPM does not set any goals. We do not set goals. We just put the program out there and offer opportunities to federal employees to be able to make pledges to their charities. We do not set any goals. Again, those charts, as I said earlier, it's going to depend on how low a level you go in terms of size of the office, and again, it's coercion is in the eye of the beholder. If somebody feels that that chart's going down to such a level that they're feeling coerced to pledge, then we've got to just talk about changing the levels. We're hoping to, as we slowly move away from the ways it's being done, and we're getting more involved with bringing the charities in, that we'll be getting away from a lot of those things, and just getting back, because federal employees are usually people that are very civic minded, and so we're hoping that brings back the idea of just that charitable giving is just important in and of itself. And
this is going to be a tough transition year. I mean, clearly this is going to be a year where there's going to have to be a lot of hand holding and a lot of head patting and a lot of trying to keep tempers from flaring. But I think that precisely what you're saying, though, is for the local coordinating committees. I mean, they've been sort of instructed as the do's and don'ts under the new provisions, and I think that agencies really need to start depending a little bit more on those folks, because those folks have the authority and they've been instructed in this to sort of help you navigate like what isn't okay and what isn't okay, so that you don't have to be the abominable no person. You can sort of hand off that role to somebody, to somebody who is in a position of authority and who can speak to it in a way that's not
And I am used to being the abominable no person. So I have children. I am used to this.
Exactly. I totally hear you. Yes.
Excellent. And I think that might come in handy with this next question. An agency asks, does this new ban on fundraising events prohibit agencies from having auction type events? And they clarify to ask, if we have an auction that is not collecting funds, but instead the winning bidder goes on a computer and donates that amount to a charity of their choice, is that no longer a fundraising?
No, that is still a fundraising event. So you can't have auctions. Yeah, that would, I mean, because then if we allowed auctions, then it would be the same with a book sale. Well, if I buy the book, then I just put the, or okay, well, I just spent a quarter on that cookie, so I should go and put this quarter into the, and no, that's still, and what happens though then is and that violates IRS regulations, because they're putting in that money, but they're getting something in return. And so that violates the IRS regulations. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Another viewer asks, can we sell T-shirts in advance of our kickoff event? The event is a walk for CFC where we will have online pledging or pledge cards accessible during the event.
Now, when you say sell T-shirts, if you could clarify that, or, I mean, you're just basically, you're creating T-shirts and people just pay the price of the T-shirt. It's not a fundraising in terms of that the T-shirt only costs $10, but you're selling them for $20 or something like that. Is this where just the idea is, hey, we want to all look the same, so if you could buy all the, and let me take that one back, but I wanted to clarify that question on that one, but I also want to take that one back with me. So
okay,
I think that's the second one we're taking back with us, right? So,
yeah.
Okay, excellent. I will mark it so we are.
But if they could clarify that was what they meant by selling T-shirts, that would help too.
This viewer asks, could you give an example of a situation where providing a modest prize would not qualify as fundraising? So I think they're looking at ways where they might be able to provide a modest recognition, but they don't want to run afoul of the bar on fundraising events.
Well, I mean, you could have a couple things. It could be just a draw when as soon as you show up at this informational event, you can get a raffle ticket to be drawn, so if somebody wins a prize just for being at the event. The chili cook-off's the other one where they get if they get the blue ribbon, or maybe they get the parking space or whatever, but a modest prize with that ribbon. That would be, another one where there were no funds raised, but I think, those were a couple just off the top of my head of ways that you could do the modest prize that wouldn't be a fundraising event.
Okay, so this would be sort of fair to say that if there's a contest that's not related to the raising of funds for the CFC, just to get people interested in the event or interested in participating or attending, that's where we would maybe use a modest prize. Yeah,
you could. Yeah, that's kind of generalizing. So if you have any specific questions, feel free to contact us. But those are, the couple there that people as they come to the event, if you give them a ticket. I know at our kickoffs at OPM, they put something under a couple seats. They put a small little prize. So it's like, at the end of it, look under your seat and see if you happen to have won the little modest little gift that is given just for having attended the event.
Right. So the key is that you're not asking them to contribute any money in order to be able to be eligible to win the prize.
Yes.
And so, so whether it's the chili cook-off or it's a raffle or anything, no monies are being exchanged. Like no money is changing hands to establish who the winner of the chili cook-off is or to establish who won the raffle.
Correct.
Okay.
And I have another question, and this is, when charities appear at agency events, can they advertise their CFC number so that employees can find them later when they go out to fill out?
Oh, yes. In fact, they should be advertising. Now, if they're there to make a presentation, and like at the kickoff, how they'll bring a charity in, they have already been trained that although they can mention who they are and everything, they're supposed to be talking about the CFC as a whole and reminding everybody that there are lots of different types of agencies. But when you've got like a charity fair where you've got a table, they'll have their brochures, they'll have their pictures and showing all that they do, and yes, their CFC code. Believe me, they'll have plenty of little things there with their code number
their
on it.
code on it.
So,
let me give you a bracelet that has the code on it.
Excellent. We have another question, and this question is, do the regional campaigns still exist in any form? Are there still 165 odd local campaigns, or are all local activities now at the level of the 35 zones?
All local, it's the 35 zones across the country. So those are the regional, which basically combined most of them, and the LFCCs that were of those individual ones that combined together. We've tried to make sure that they're still on this combined local federal coordinating committee. So we still have the local aspect, these outreach coordinators we've got, because we were also looking, of course, to make things more efficient and effective, because the CFC does not get federal funds to pay for it. All funds to cover the cost of the CFC were prior to this taken out of donors' pledges. And now what's changed is that the actually organizations are paying an application fee now to participate.
Gotcha.
So that now when you make your pledge, hopefully, I mean, we do still have it in there that if the fees don't cover all the costs, because it's still new and still determining, that they could deduct from employee donations. But the idea would be we're going to get to the point where it's so efficient that the fees cover it and all the donors' money goes to the charities. Because right now, because of the different campaigns, we had it anywhere ranging from, some campaigns that were very efficient, but also the fact that they were also big campaigns that made a lot of money. Okay, it was 4%. Some of the smaller campaigns, it was 35%.
Oh, wow.
Of your money that was being taken off the top to pay for the cost before it went to the charity. So we're trying to change that, make it more efficient. And so one of the things with the change is that, and it was kind of agreed by we met, and actually they suggest, we felt this, but it was actually suggested at a meeting by the local federal coordinating committees. It's like, why don't you come up with a national marketing campaign, and then we'll just piggyback them off of that. But and that cuts down the cost of having 35 different marketing campaigns developed. And instead, we got a national marketing campaign going, so there'll be a national theme, and then the 35 campaigns will then draw off from that and use that and so it will just save on the cost. So that's been one of the things that we've been really looking at is cutting down on those expenses to get more money to the charities.
And maybe one more.
I think we got time for maybe one more. Yeah.
And I think this is a question that a lot of folks might have. And is there any OPM guidance on what information can be provided to non-federal employees about opportunities to donate? And do we need to be concerned that that constitutes a solicitation of a gift? Okay, if a contractor asks, you may let him know. Most of them will see something in the hallway, and contractors may voluntarily pledge. So if they come and ask for, hey, could you tell me how to go on there, and I'd like to they can make a one-time donation. But it's very, very particular. You cannot solicit them. So if they ask you for information about how to go online and get this, you can give them that information if they ask. The other thing I get questioned a lot, amazing, I always say, go back and look at the contract, is we'll get a lot that say, well, can a contractor be on the LFCC? Well, the answer to that is no, because it's got to be a federal employee. Well, can a contractor help with things regarding the CFC? And I'll say, look at the contract. Is that what that contractor is there for?
Right, exactly.
Because that contractor's supervisor might not like it if he finds that he's getting dinged for late work because this contractor was helping with the CFC. But if you've got a contractor there who's hired to do administrative type work, and you ask that person to Xerox these 20 flyers, that's administrative type work. So it's look at the contract.
Right, exactly. Well, I think we had a few questions. We have a few questions that we're going to be sharing with you, Mary, once you leave here today. But I personally just want to thank you very, very much for coming and giving us this presentation and taking the time to answer as many questions as you did. I can tell you personally that I think it's fabulous that there is a point of contact, a ready point of contact about these questions, because I know that it's something that ethics officials get a lot of. Not even that they're always necessarily ethics related questions, but somehow the CFC is something that we all tend to get questions about. And so I want to thank you both for being here, but also for very generously sharing your contact information. So, and I think Mary is quite sincere when she tells you if you have questions to do, contact her office, and they will do everything they can to try to answer any concerns that you might have.
Okay. Yes, I am. And I think he's just putting up a slide there with the.
Yeah, we've got a slide here with that contact information on it.
It's a contact for all the different members. I usually handle the ethics questions, but if you have other general questions in your region, it shows. Of course, it's it's gone now. You saw it for a second.
No, we'll be able to bring that up in just
We're
a
going to bring it
second.
up in just a second, just so that you have it.
But for general
there
type
we go.
questions, we've got our staff is divided into, areas, and so we
There we
handle.
go.
So I handle people. We say Western U.S. and the Pacific. It's actually anything west of the Mississippi is me.
Wow.
And so if it's general non-ethics questions, ethics questions, they usually come to me. But if it's just general type questions, the other staff members will handle for the various areas listed there. So.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, that concludes our broadcast for today. Again, I want to thank you, Mary, for coming in and spending this time with us. And we will hopefully be with you all next month with another broadcast. And we would just want to thank you all for joining us today, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.